Let me start with Professor Ye first. What are the advantages of India's markets for the United States, and what kind of this cooperation will bring to India?
My understanding actually is to conclude President Obama's Indian policy to this year. So it has to get some harvest. Actually, for the last 8 years, Indian-US relationship get a lot of achievements, and this is only one of them. I think in the perspective of the United States, India is not only means a very huge potential market, but also has some strategic value. That's the reason why they go to both ways, security and economics.
And Ms. Curtis, your thoughts on this?
Well, I think India's market has a lot of advantages for the U.S. And one of these is the sheer size of its middle class. There are many opportunities for exports. In fact, U.S. exports to India create hundreds of thousands of jobs here in the U.S. The fact that India is a democracy and there's relative political stability there, that's also an advantage. And I think the fact that Prime Minister Modi has shown that he prioritizes reform of the economy. He may not have been able to move as quickly as people had hoped, but he certainly is moving in the right direction when it comes to making those reforms. And one example is the passage of the GST, the Goods and Services Tax Bill, that was passed through the Indian Parliament recently. So that's moving in the right direction. And I think the U.S. sees a lot of opportunities in expanding economic and investment cooperation with India, but also, as the previous speaker said, there's strategic value for the U.S. in developing its relationship with India.
Now, Mr. Nalapat, let me bring you into the discussion now. What kind of cooperation is India looking specifically for? What the best of it can India get from the cooperation with the United States?
Well, I'd like to point out that India and the United States have been cooperating at various levels from the ground up for a very long time. Indian universities and US universities are partnering across a variety of fields, including biotechnology, medicine, engineering, you name the subject, and Indian and US universities are partnering there. Indian research institutes and US research institutes are partnering. Researchers are going across here and there. We have a 3 million strong Indian American community, and there's a vast flow of humanity across both borders. So the reality is that government is only catching up with what is already happening on the ground, which is a very vigorous engagement between the US and India.
The bilateral mechanism have developed during the Obama years. However, there's one BIT, US-India Bilateral Investment Treaty. Both sides have negotiated for 8 years, but remain apart on intellectual property issues and others. Now, Mr. Ye, do you think that this project could have a breakthrough at this opportunity?
I think so, but we also should notice that President Obama only has a couple of months left. So what's the new president in DC will has a new approach on India. I think if the Hillary Clinton take the position, and the Indian-US relation will upgrade in the new level. But if ask the candidate, I mean the Trump, Mr. Trump, there will be some questions. So it remains some uncertain. But we should know India and US relation will be the most stable bilateral relation in the between the big powers. Because of they have the strategic interest, because of they have the common value, but there's only one obstacle lay on the front of the bilateral relationship is their bureaucracy system. Because we all know both countries, when they push something happened, they always take a very long time.
Now, Ms. Curtis, how will the upcoming presidential election there in the United States affect the ties between U.S. and India?
Well, I think there's broad bipartisan support for improving ties with India. We saw that when Prime Minister Modi visited the U.S. a few months ago and addressed a joint session of the U.S. Congress. You saw congressional members from both sides of the aisle really praising the Indian Prime Minister and the Indian people and the forward movement that has been made with U.S.-India ties. So I think whoever is elected in November here in the U.S., I think they will continue the momentum that President Obama has started with the U.S.-India relationship. And we see a commitment to that relationship from India as well under Prime Minister Modi. So I'm pretty bullish when it comes to the continuation of the US-India relationship. And I think there are strategic imperatives from both India and the US. They see value in this relationship. They see value in working together, whether it be naval cooperation. You can see this with the recently completed logistics agreement that was just signed here in Washington, D.C. This shows that both sides put real value on the relationship. They have strategic reasons for wanting to grow that relationship. And I see that continuing into the next administration, regardless of who is elected.
Now let's talk about that logistic agreement. Now this is considered a milestone in the ties between U.S. and India military. However, many also point to the fact that this agreement will irritate China, Pakistan, or even Russia. So Mr. Nalapat, I want to get your thoughts on this. What's in it for India?
Well, I'd like to point out that this is a fairly routine agreement that's been signed by the United States with a large number of countries. As far as China is concerned, China has very good relations with both Pakistan and India. And I would like to remind everybody that Pakistan has signed very many more agreements with the United States than India ever has or intends to do. I mean, Pakistan is hosting US troops there. Pakistan has been serving US as bases and various other activities. And nevertheless, there's a very strong bond between China and Pakistan. So we are quite certain that our friends in China will understand and appreciate the reasons why we are signing this agreement, and I think other agreements in the future with the United States. And I'm sure they'll agree that these are not agreements designed to create tension. These are agreements that are designed to ensure that there is synergy between these two countries in the fields of technology and the fields of global security.
Mr. Ye, what do you think it was just been said?
In this point, I agree with Professor Nalapat. Actually, we all know there's agreements between India and the US. It's not comparable with the agreements between the US and another alliance, because all the agreements, there's a one principle between the between the India and the US. They have to handle the case by case. That means they won't be spontaneously accessed to the Indian military base by, for the American Navy fleets or another military mechanism. So this means it's not a formal military alliance, only some engagement or cooperation. So in this part, I don't think that we have enough reason to see or to foresee these two countries will go into some alliance. So far away to say that. Between China, between US and Australia, between US and Canada, we can say these are formal military ties. But for India and the US, we still think India will value his independence. So I don't think India will so eager to jump into the military ties with network with the United States far away.
So you still think this is far away
Yeah,
from a former military alliance?
And I even don't think that's the intention of the Premier Modi. I don't think the India has the policy that to be the member of the United Military Alliance.
Ms. Curtis, for the United States, it seems like Pentagon has made closer military ties with India a priority. I mean, last year established a special unit within Pentagon just to promote cooperation with India. And this is the 6th high-level interactions between two top defense officials. What's the thinking behind this? Because many say that Washington has deliberately wooed New Delhi to become its quasi-ally. What do you think?
Well, I think it is true that under Defense Secretary Ash Carter, we have seen tremendous movement on the U.S.-India defense relationship. Really, defense ties have been at the heart of the improving U.S.-India relationship over the last 2 years. And I would credit Defense Secretary Ash Carter as well as Indian Defense Minister Manohar Parkar. They've actually met 6 times in the last few years, and they have made tremendous progress. And Ash Carter has put priority on the India defense relationship since he was Deputy Secretary of Defense. It was under him that the Defense Trade and Technology Initiative, the DTTI initiative, was established 4 years ago. And this is the initiative that seeks to break down bureaucratic obstacles to furthering defense trade. And we have seen the establishment of working groups for the US and India to explore, for example, the co-development of aircraft engines, aircraft carrier technology, and they recently, just this past week, have agreed to establish 5 new working groups to look at other areas of potential US-India co-development or even co-production of certain military technologies. So yes, the US has very much wooed India in terms of improving defense cooperation, but also, you know, India has responded under this current defense minister. The previous defense minister under the previous Congress government had made clear that he was not interested in really moving closer to the US and prioritizing relations with the US. And we see a completely different attitude under this current defense minister.
Now, Mr. Nalapat, how close is India willing to go with the United States militarily? Because Mr. Ye just mentioned he thinks that India does not have the intention to form military alliance with the United States. Give us an Indian perspective.
Well, I'd like to point out that today in the entire Asian region, China is very important for economic prosperity. And it would be a catastrophic situation if there were ever a conflict between the United States and China. I am very certain the leaders of both countries will ensure that such a catastrophe does not take place. So those who are, you know, interpreting this kind of a closer movement of India and the United States as somehow directed against any third country, I believe they are wrong. The important point is we are a country which 800 million people are below the age of 35. They have no memory of any Cold War. They have no memory of the fact that India was an ally of the Soviet Union and the United States was on the other side. This is a new country, and even our civil service, most of the younger people have a very different attitude from those who are 55 and older. So the Cold War is now a fading memory and the future is beckoning. And so far as the future is concerned, I repeat, the relationships between India and the US in the field of technology, research, education, health are so numerous that it's only proper that a relationship be formalized. There's a huge network of informal relationships, and finally the government is finding the courage to formalize it. I agree with Ms. Carter that in 2002 the Vajpayee government signed an agreement on some information sharing with the US. After that the Congress government did nothing, but now again the Modi government has swung into action, and I believe there's going to be more agreements in the pipeline. These agreements are designed to ensure security and stability throughout Asia. They're designed to fight terrorism, and they're certainly not designed against any country, least of all a country as indispensable to the future of Asia as China.
All right, we still have some more time. I want to briefly just touch upon the dynamics between Pakistan, India, and the United States. Pakistan was once the third largest recipient of Washington's foreign aid, but now economic aid has declined 53% from 2011 to 2015. Security aid fell even more, 73% in the same period. Meantime, India is still the top recipient of U.S. economic assistance. Mr. Ye, how do you look at the dynamics here? As Pakistan and India do not see eye to eye on every issue, can we say that the U.S. has made its choice?
I don't think the United States need to make a choice because there is no balance in the subcontinent. India has the priorities for nature. So I think the Americans' interest or the Americans' policy should targeting on how to make the Pakistan not feel panic, how to enhance the Pakistan's confidence. And in this target, I think the China, US, and even for India, we have some common interest that if the Pakistan really suffered from a very severe the terrorist attack, or even fell into part, they will be a common disaster for all of us. So I don't think that there's a zero-sum game between India and Pakistan, between US and China.